Hi everyone, well welcome to Red Marker's webinar today on the secret to scaling content production and looking at automating marketing compliance. So just a quick overview as to Red Marker. So we're a technology company that works with a lot of organizations around the world in industries that are highly regulated and have a lot of marketing collateral or content going into market. We've been around for about 9 years and have a really interesting evolution to our product and services. And we're excited to talk to you a bit more about what we do and how we do it, but also, more importantly, about some of the challenges that are being faced by marketing and legal teams. Today, you've got myself. I'm Ryan Booker. I'm the Business Development Director for Asia Pacific.
And myself, I'm Ryan Palfrey. I'm the Product Manager here at Red Marker. You can see we've got our nice black and white photos to look forward, but that's actually a suit and tie photo, which I can't say I've worn. I don't know if you've worn a tie recently, Ryan, but it's been a long while.
I can't remember the last time I wore a tie. Being in Brisbane, it doesn't get cold enough, I feel. That's my excuse anyway. So fortunately for everybody, they've got the Ryans today, which is also known as Ryan Squared. So let's let's kick along. But mate, I think you look great in a tie.
Thank you.
So a bit of an overview of today's webinar. We're going to set the scene between the sort of marketing compliance team and what's really going on there, and where things are starting to go wrong within those or between those two teams. We're going to look at a bit of a grand vision of where we could be or would like to be, and then looking at leveraging technology within that scope and that sphere to get those teams working better. And then we'll look at a case study as well of where it's gone exceptionally well. So let's start at the beginning. So look, picture this. You're the modern marketer or content creator surrounded by brand new technology, gigabytes of data, a mantra by your CEO or board to really grow your customer base and revenue. And you've been given a budget to completely pay for it all. Sounds like an opportunity dream. The world is completely your oyster. Your cup is brimming over with optimism of what could be. In perfect harmony with your amazing like-minded team, you strategize over coffee, donuts, and gluten-free mud cake. Like the fine artists of the Renaissance, a precise, detailed roadmap of exactly how you'll get to this marketing utopia is born. New buzzwords are created, beautiful campaigns are developed, timelines and media are booked in. Nothing can stop you. You have all the tools, the resources you need to expand into perpetuity. Your mantra of growth will be realized. You'll be hailed a hero by your peers. Then late one afternoon, just as you're packing up your desk to leave for the day, chuffed with all the work that you and your team have done, your email pings. Bing. It's legal. We've been looking at your latest campaign and got a ton of edits. However, we're unable to approve it this time. And you reply, how long will that take? They retort, maybe a week or two. This is, Ryan, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but this is exactly the conversation we have with our clients all the time. It's this effort in developing a campaign and developing new content and trying to figure out how do I engage my client base or customer base. And then a roadblock comes along in the form of the compliance process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so common. It's so frustrating. You talk to lots of people and it's like they're always in the way. It's a hurdle. It's a roadblock. Also, I would just add, I think next time we have a strategizing session, you need to be in charge of the catering. It sounds sounds like a good time.
Spare no expense. I mean, we've got a budget to pay for it all. After all, happy team, happy work life.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so as you say, it's a constant frustration for the marketing team, but it's also probably important to acknowledge that there's the same sort of frustration on the legal team and the compliance team as well. The relationship there can be strained, and they've got a tough task. There's huge volumes of marketing material to review in addition to all the other demands on their time. It's not just reviewing documents for compliance review, and there's a considerable amount of regulation to get across. That regulation keeps changing. Regulators are becoming active. That's a source of anxiety. And if you miss something, the consequences can be massive. Latitude Financial, $1.5 million fine for not including an unsubscribed link in those emails. It's a word that was missed, and the results can be really, really bad, not only financially, but also reputationally, because you get plastered all over the press, for what you've done.
Yeah, that brand damage is really important. And as we sort of discussed a bit earlier around the marketing campaign and how much effort's put in, aside from the coffee and mud cakes, there's so much effort put in developing those strategies, only to have it fall over and set the team back, sometimes years in that brand value and brand, I guess, how it's perceived in the marketplace. That's such a strong thing. We talk about the dollars, we don't talk about the brand damage a lot. And the brand damage does equal dollars at a certain point.
Yeah, and I think we've seen recently the ACCC in particular has become more active, and from their perspective, when they do get a successful prosecution or a successful fine, it's good PR for them, and so they will put it across the press. They will go, you will see it on the ABC and similar, and you don't want to get caught up in that.
No, absolutely, and they're looking for brands. That's the key piece. They're looking for people to hold up in front of the market and say, look, here we are. This is wrong. So they're certainly out there looking, and it sort of heightens that tension that compliance and legal people certainly have. So they take more of a tight approach to compliance, whereas marketing, again, are looking for growth, which is a really good segue into this sort of state of the departments and, the juxtaposition of these two very important business viewpoints, can cause significant problems for the business. You've got, on one hand, a team that's designed and tasked with growth, and on the other hand, you've got a team who's tasked, designed to protect the business. And that causes stress. And for marketing, it's stress due to requiring more content. We talk about personalization these days and responding almost in a one-on-one capacity to customers. Well, that requires a lot of content to be developed and created. And that's stressful enough, having current content levels, let alone having to push more through. There's frustration that happens due to, turnaround times being blown out because compliance are completely swamped with the new influx of content driving through, but also regulations that are driving some of that frustration for them as well. The confusion around the approvals and reg areas. So who does the approvals in a team? Sometimes it's very much just send it to a team and they do it. There's not a specific person. Those teams can turn over sometimes quite quickly. And then there's the delays in the turnaround times, which has implications the whole way down the campaign trail. We're seeing deadlines being pushed out, which results in media being lost, and that increases the cost of the business, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Those exact same feelings that you just identified for marketing is something compliance experiences as well. It's two sides of the same coin. They also have stress because of the increased content volume coming from marketing. They have frustration due to these unbalanced resources. Marketing have the time, have the money, and they have very large teams. And the compliance team or the legal team, they're always being asked to do more with less. And likewise, if the approval process isn't clear for the marketing team, then it's probably not clear for the compliance team either, because they're sort of part of that. And lastly, as we mentioned, you get it wrong, you get a fine.
Expensive. Actually, I saw a recent questionnaire that asked the question of the ratio between compliance and legal teams versus the marketing team. And it was something like 25-1 or even 50-1, where there's 50 marketing people for every compliance person or marketing compliance person, which to me is, you can kind of see very quickly how the bottlenecks start to appear, and the stress and the frustration can appear purely just by unbalanced resources.
Absolutely. I think, many places we've worked with will have sort of one or two people who are, their sole job is to do that compliance piece, that review of marketing material. And if they're busy, that's the backlog right there. That's your bottleneck.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's break down this into a little bit more detail. We've got a few problems that really arise between these two departments. The first, and probably the most obvious, is that the review process is poor, and that exacerbates the problem. You've got inefficient back and forth between the teams, often via email. Our research shows up to 70% of teams just use email. And the approvals process can be ad hoc, and there's also limited education between departments, which means the problem is stays the same or gets worse. And regulatory guidelines are also not standardized. A lot of the compliance knowledge resides in the heads of our legal and compliance team. And so it's not often the case that there's, here is how we do it. Here is a nice reference guide that we all work from. It's often pockets in the organization where there's some sort of standardization. But what that means is inconsistency. And that's hard from the compliance team because you're managing marketing teams who are saying, well, how come we can't do it this way this time? Last time it was okay. And it's not necessarily the compliance team's fault. It's just that there's this lack of standardization across the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, and this is kind of an interesting conversation around how you mentioned that there's these pockets. That kind of leads into not knowing where to start or where to improve. You've got two separate teams with two very clear goals that are separate from each other in essence. The teams are then stuck in, who fixes this problem? Is it compliance, or is it legal that fix this problem, or is it marketing that fix this problem? And you kind of reach that, they reach, and we see this a lot with our clients and organizations, as they reach this impasse where it's not our fault, it's yours, and it's your fault. No, it's not mine. So nothing ever changes. It just becomes the same problem. And that's a real issue moving forward, is we're trying to get some consistency or some alignment between the teams. But if you're tasked with protecting the business, it's a very different proposition to growing the business. Hence,
I think to that point, Ryan, you make a really, really good point. It's that there's the different objectives of the teams, growing versus protecting, but also, let's be candid, there's sometimes personality clashes here. It's a process problem. That's something that needs to improve. It's also a people problem. And a lot of the people we work with, not only has improving the process, we'll get into that in a moment, but not only has improving the process helped, but also improving the relationships between the teams has been a key piece.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, absolutely. So we've spent a bit of time on, some of the challenges. We recognize that there are a lot of distinct viewpoints between those two teams that can cause some stress and frustrations, particularly as they're driven in certain ways. So let's move away from that. I kind of want to think about, so what could it be if I had a vision of a perfect world? What would that look like? And we asked this question to some of our clients and potential clients and customers. And this, the interesting part about the whole where could you be if you wanted to, was if we look back in time, the biggest change that happened in marketing compliance was the invention of the email back in the 90s. And nothing's really changed in that time. People are still using email. I create content, I email it to the compliance or legal teams, and they come back to me with all these changes, and all of a sudden we've got a game of email tag or email tennis. So in the last 30 years, not much has really changed. So when we ask the question of what would you like to happen? What would be your ideal situation from a marketing compliance view point of view? Marketing team members would say, I don't want to have to send it to legal and compliance. I just want to be able to send my content out and not worry about the internal process. I just want it to go out. When we asked the same question for compliance and legal teams, they said, I just want marketing material to go out compliant. I don't have to look at it. I don't need to look at it. I just want it to go out. So interestingly, you kind of see the vision is exactly the same. They all want compliant content to go out to marketing, out to the market, without having to go through the internal bureaucracy of our current process. So it's quite an interesting development where we go, oh, okay, so you're both chasing the same vision. You just want compliant content to go out and not worry about having to show everyone in the entire business before it does. So whilst I don't think we'll ever get to that 100% where we will still need lawyers to look at campaigns, and we'll need compliance people to look at certain things to check and put a fresh set of eyes across them. So reaching that perfect panacea of nobody looking at anything and just going out, it's a great dream. However, I just don't think we're going to get there. However, some organizations are starting to go, okay, that's a vision. That's an area we'd love to get to. And they're making strides to that point. So they're going, well, how do we make that internally less of a roadblock? How do we become more efficient inside our business so we can scale our content? There's so much more from a technology perspective than you can do with just emails. And that's the beauty of this thing, is that for a long time, it's been human to human with an email interaction. Now they're doing so much more. And where you start, this is a critical, and this is why we're showing this particular document and this is available on our website too, by the way, so redmarker.ai. Now, this is a great place to start. If you're starting the journey of your marketing compliance process or wanting to look at, okay, how do I scale content even more than what we've currently got? You can look at this particular chart, and it will show you your maturity. It will give you a sense as to where your maturity is. And stage one being ad hoc, which means pretty much you're flying by the seat of your pants, you're creating content, you're just shooting it through to whoever's listening, probably early in the journey, to be really honest. And then you have an optimize, which is you're using technology at the right levels. You've got a documented process, you've got rules and regulations that you're using, you've got education process with your marketing team, so they're learning throughout their journey cycle as well. So if you do want to look a bit more as to where you currently sit, please take a look on our website. It's a really great place to start and give you a bit of a sense as where you can work on. Your people might be, at a managed or optimized stage, but your compliance checklists are back in ad hoc. And there we go. We've got some pretty major inefficiencies.
That's a really great point, Ryan, just to touch on as well, is that different pockets of the organization can have a different sort of process maturity. And it's not the case that just like the organization has a particular maturity. What you often find is that, you look across at another team or another part of the business and you go, well, they're actually doing things really well over there. Why don't we see what we can do to copy them or to leverage those parts? And also, being candid with yourself and about where the organization sits. It's very easy. We're all guilty of this, to look at something like this and say, well, we're optimized or we're managed. We're at the pretty high stage. And it might be that that's the goal. It might be that that's the theory, but it's important to assess the practice. Where are you actually? What's actually happening on the ground? Talk to your team members. When was the last time you had to go through this process and how did it work? And often you can discover it's not as sophisticated as you expect.
Agreed. And for a long time, I think particularly in the marketing side of things, there's been a lot of focus on marketing technology that's designed to boost output. It's boosting output, content in, output out. There hasn't been a lot of focus and effort put on internal operations of marketing. So how do we work as a team? What are our roadblocks? What is stopping us from being hyper efficient in our day-to-day? And the same goes for legal and compliance teams. The budget necessarily hasn't been there. They're very much a headcount in some cases, with little budget for technology or resources to be more efficient. So you kind of got this impasse of, for a long time, marketing has been boosting their content, but internally it has stayed the same for such a long time. So it's a good opportunity. Certainly check it out if you'd like to explore a bit more.
So where do we go from here? You've assessed your process maturity. You've identified where the gaps are. I think, where do we go next? The secret to scaling content production. That was the webinar title. No surprises. It's technology. It's technology. It's automation. And it's important to highlight at this stage that adding automation to a poor process will make the process worse. You need to have the process change and the alignment within the organization to support implementing technology. You can't just sort of plonk automation in and call it a day. Practically, what that means is, from the compliance team, for example, writing down the rules of thumb which you're using when you're assessing, marketing content for compliance. You're getting checklists and references which are, agreed across the organization, guides which there's been training given on, and involving other teams in the process as well. If there's brand guidelines, getting the content creators on board, just getting your house in order, that's the right time. Then let's look at using technology. Let's now automate things.
And I think for a long time, and we talk about robot lawyers a lot, and we talk about the legal scape being complex, and it certainly is. However, there are a lot of things that can be digitized from a decision-making process. Like we talk about, I'll give you an example, like best in a particular advertisement. We know that if you use the word best, you better be able to back it up. And if you can't, you shouldn't be using it. It's a risky word. That can be digitized or put into code. And the automation of that is, well, okay, so how do marketing teams use the automation of decisions like that in their content creation side of things? So not necessarily at the end. I mean, yes, you can certainly use it at the end of a campaign and use that technology to help there. But what about during, as you're creating the content? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to start making automated decisions using some of those decisions that have been created from a legal and compliance perspective and doing it in real time. And then that's probably the critical piece is automation is designed to make you more efficient, but have access to information a lot more quicker. So it's a really fascinating area. And I think the robot lawyer side of things is a fascinating area too. And whilst it's not the topic of discussion today, I think I just want to point out that I think they're trying to, in the States, pay for some court costs if someone's happy to use a robot lawyer in court, pay for the damages, or if there's anything else outside of that, just to prove the concept. So there's a lot of technology moves at the moment that are happening in this space of getting what's inside, what has historically been inside the head of your lawyer or compliance officer into a digital format. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, it is so exciting. And we're sort of in that golden age now of where computers are really, really helping us do some incredible things. With the automation which we've seen be used, particularly for marketing compliance, I think it's important to emphasize that we're not seeing AI replace people entirely. ChatGPT and all the hype around that, which you've probably seen on LinkedIn a lot, Ryan. It's the flavor of the month. Everyone's talking about it. It can give you this impression that we're just going to be replaced, but it's not, right? We're being assisted now by AI.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think they reached 100 million users in the space of days or even weeks. I don't know. It was the record for getting to 100 million users. It just shows you sort of how mainstream the thinking is of AI. And then we're starting to see it being included in technology in an assistive way, not a I'm taking over kind of way.
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary. And it can do so much. So where we see it having a lot of impact is where it quickly, repeatedly, and efficiently streamlines redundant tasks. And I think we say on the slide that it reduces business risk due to human error. A great example of that is disclaimers. Disclaimers are giant blocks of text. They're tedious to read, they're repetitive, and they're very easy to miss keywords. You miss keywords, suddenly you've said the wrong thing, suddenly you could be in legal hot water. That's the perfect thing for a machine to look at. And even better, because we're doing AI automation these days, you can train it to the specific needs of your organization. It's very easy to think, oh, well, we can just get AI and we can just add that and that will help. What actually happens is we take AI and you train it to your organization. Each organization has a different risk profile. You have different regulations which apply to you, different things that matter to you, different wordings for specific things, different products. And that's the power, actually. It's the automation that's tailored for you. It's so incredible. And what that means is it's scalable. So I think we say there, we scanned 50,000 risks in 2022 using AI. I don't know about you, Ryan. I don't think I'd want to be doing that manually. It's great to do with a machine.
Can you imagine? I envy anyone.
Yeah, it's a lot that we can do these days with AI. And it's a business decision. Do you hire 10 more compliance people, or do you start using technology, as you say, to remove that bottleneck? That's where the power is. And where it ends up sort of with this AI that's trained, that's scalable, is in first line review. That's where the real money is. We have marketing teams using AI trained to their organizational needs. They put their marketing content through. The robot lawyer, as you say, sits on their shoulder and says, you can't say that, maybe try saying this. And when it's done properly, about 80% of documents don't need a second line review because they're fairly clear. It's black and white, it's cut and dry.
And that's a huge, we sort of mentioned a bit earlier around the vision and the mutual vision of both compliance and legal teams and marketing going, look, I'd love to be able to not even have to send it to someone internally to get this content out. And lawyers and compliance were like, yeah, I agree. I just wish it was compliant. So all of a sudden you're sort of starting to capture their rules or capture their sort of views and sort of perception of legislation and regulations and putting into a digital format so that the marketing teams can use it when they need it the most, which is creating content or starting to get it ready for the market, which is really fascinating. So that first line review is something I want to talk more about because we've got a really great case study that kind of talks about that too. So without further ado, let's talk about that. We've got a a very large business insurer, an Australian business insurer, who's now a client of ours. And to really sort of give you a summary quickly of what we did. So they had some issues with scaling their content. So they were really struggling to keep up with the demands or requirements that their strategy was really asking for them. They're wanting to grow their business. They had competitors coming through, and it is a very competitive market, who were slightly smaller and more nimble. Their risk appetite was very tight in terms of their compliance review. The compliance and legal team checked every single asset before it went out. And that's from blog posts right through to obviously major campaigns. Approval could take weeks, and marketing felt bad in chasing it. I mean, they've got an urgency. Like, I've got a deadline, I'm chasing it. They felt bad for chasing it down and pushing approval on these compliance officers. So all of a sudden, this frustration was starting to build up, and you could start seeing this agitation between the two teams. Now, fast forward 6 months, approval has dropped from taking the days to weeks to, in some cases, minutes, which is astronomically large. Now, that's for things like blog posts and maybe social media posts or small campaigns. So 80% of the content that they're now creating is no longer going through a legal and compliance person. It goes through technology that runs it for them. They can make changes in real time, and then once it's approved, it can then go out to market. So that's, from a business perspective, huge. Now, in the last 6 months, we've reviewed 2,000 documents for them, which is a big number. That has saved them an extraordinary amount of time. The legal and compliance people are significantly happier, and so are the marketing team. And that's the end point, is getting a happy content team and a happy compliance team. It just makes good business sense. Now, how did they do it? That's probably the critical piece. So the first thing they did was assess the problem. What problem do we actually have? We know there's frustration, and that generally is a smoke signal that there's a problem. Now, we worked with their digital and marketing teams to conduct a short investigation into their workflow and how it operated, and found that the major pain point in their content and campaign journey was the compliance approval time delays, which caused deadlines to be missed, slow reaction times to competitor and market changes, which of course put them on the back foot. So they wanted to be more agile and more flexible with the market. The second stage to then understanding the problem, the second stage was to really try and get their own house in order and understand in a detailed level what and how it worked. And that's not only from a marketing perspective, but also compliance. So marketing mapped out the steps that they took to get content from an idea into market. Compliance and legal put together a set of rules, regulations, a repository of disclaimers, everything that would help the marketing team understand how they made their decisions. And that's a really critical point for the third point, which is starting to look at using technology to help. So without them spending the time in kind of downloading what's in their minds and putting it into some sort of text, the technology can help. Without doing that, it's impossible, because it doesn't know what it's looking for. Like you mentioned earlier, technology needs a little bit of help in going, okay, well, what are you looking for? Why are you looking for it? And then once it's set up, it just goes, and then it can scale. So in this instance, we help them obviously with the technology, a piece of technology that can help not only the marketing team and the compliance and legal teams in their separate business units, but also allow the marketing team to start using it earlier and when they need it. So earlier in their journey, and which essentially meant using it at the stage of content creation or idea generation. Historically, they would have had to send the finished version to their compliance team, and all of a sudden the roadblocks pop up. Now, with the technology that we help them with, our Red Marker platform, for example, the marketing team can look at the content, make the changes in real time, and deliver compliant content to their compliant officers or legal officers. Now, they moved to a point where the legal and compliance teams wanted to see and understand and develop some trust in the technology, which is a critical piece. So it took about 4 or 5 months for that to happen. And in that time, they're able to slowly let go of certain things. So now, again, as I mentioned, 80% of the material that's being created, particularly in the blog or the website material and social media, 80% of that material is no longer needing to go through their compliance team. So it's now put into the system, make the changes, it gives you a clean bill of health, and away they go. That frees up the legal and compliance teams to do much more larger compliance objectives, which is super important. And then it also gives the power back to the marketing team to start delivering quality content in real time, personalized content, one-to-one customer conversations, you name it, they've got it. So that's a really fascinating move from a really tense situation and slow times to rapid turnarounds. The quote from the client recently was, "Marketing and compliance are becoming one." And to me, that's massive, because we just spoke earlier about how separate they both are because of their two mantras. So for us, we're super excited about this vision coming into play and it impacting businesses in a way that they've never imagined.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And one of the great points to draw out there is there was early alignment between the two teams. If one, because it's a symbiotic relationship, isn't it? If there's one team that's like, we really need to fix this, and the other team's not on board, you're pushing a rock uphill. Whereas if you say to your marketing counterpart, or you say to your compliance counterpart, look, we have a problem, don't we? And it actually turns out, as you say, we probably have the same vision here. Neither of us want to be doing the low risk, low value work. Why don't we work together, get our house in order? Let's get technology on board. And then we saw it in this instance with this case study where both teams were on board, the results were phenomenal.
Absolutely. I agree with you on 100%. I think that's the key piece, is just dropping that guard and going, look, we've both got a problem here. How do we both fix this? And you're right, getting alignment on the vision just helped so much in getting them to this point. So it's super exciting for us, and certainly for our client. They're thrilled with how this new world exists rather than just the old email, we talked about before. So just some final thoughts for us as we sort of finish up today's webinar. Many organizations really have reached their content production limit. That's certainly what we're seeing, with years and years of investment into the marketing technology to really support content output. They're kind of really hitting a limit. However, they're really starting to stall. That's technology starting to stall. The way that it's operating, the way that's operating internally, is not allowing that technology to sort of hit its limits either. It still has the same bottlenecks within the teams. The compliance review process is probably the major bottleneck that sits within that hasn't been reviewed in 30 plus years. Still runs on the old similar. We harp on the email, but that's kind of what the reality is. It's still the email process. That's certainly been our experience with certainly a lot of clients. As we shift into more challenging economic conditions, there is more pressure than ever before to drive growth from new and existing customers. Regulators too are ramping up their all-seeing capabilities to ensure compliance, protect the community, and that's putting legal and compliance teams on edge. This heightened sense of business protection is probably at its peak at the moment, which means that they're sort of wanting to control things a bit more, which puts a lot more pressure on the marketing output. But something really has to give. Our recommendation is don't let it break. Technology has come such a long way in alleviating a lot of those problems internally, particularly in those things that we always thought that humans could do. We always thought that a lawyer or a compliance person had to make decisions, whereas a lot of it can be automated. Look, and with that, we thank you for attending. And if you've got any questions at all, please reach out to the Ryans or Ryan Squared, or anyone at Red Marker. We certainly look forward to talking with you more about your business. We get excited about these challenges because we know that there's a fix for them.
Awesome. Yeah. And thanks very much.